So I have 4 questions, and if you answer yes to any of these questions, you do it yourself. If you answer no to all of them, then you delegate it. So the 4 work worth doing tests are: will this help build meaningful relationships? Will this teach me something valuable? Will being able to say I did it bring genuine satisfaction? And will this create memories to pass down? If you can say yes to any of those 4 things, you do that damn job yourself.
Welcome to the Business of Influence. Today's guest built one of the most trusted brands in the fitness industry, but not by chasing trends. Jonathan Goodman is the founder of the Personal Trainer Development Center, author of multiple best-selling books, and the creator of The Obvious Choice, a game-changing framework for coaches and creators who want to build trust and not just attention. In this episode, we unpack John's ambition triangle, his method for mastering health, wealth, and relationships without burning out. We also dig into why most online coaches are playing the wrong game on social media and how to build a business that actually supports your life. John doesn't just teach balance, he rejects it. Instead, he's created a system for purposeful unbalance that lets him thrive in one area while maintaining the others. If you're stuck on the content treadmill or struggling to prioritize what really matters, this conversation will hit hard. Let's get into it. Welcome to the show, Jonathan. It's an honor to have you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, man. Thank you. I'm looking forward to getting to know you better, man.
One of the things that I really admire about you is your emphasis on materialistic and superficial things. No, I'm just kidding. Obviously, you don't have an emphasis on materialistic things. You're quite the opposite of that, actually. And one of the things that I truly respect about you and admire you and why I follow you online is because you do have very good systems in place to make sure that you prioritize the things that are most important. And
yeah.
I feel like a lot of our values do align. I've never been a guy who's cared a lot about materialistic things. I've always wanted to prioritize things that were more important: health, family, all of that. And you have this concept about the ambition triangle. And I think that it would be great for people to hear a little bit about that concept, because I think a lot of people, they try to improve in multiple areas of their life simultaneously. And I think you've got systems in place for that. So I'd like for you to explain a little bit about, like, what are your true priorities? How do you make sure that you have time to prioritize different areas, and where did they come from? That's actually the thing that I'm most interested in. Where did your values originally come from?
We could do, this is my entire next book, so how long do you want to talk about this? I'll start, and I can go off on any tangent you want. How about that? My next book, I'm actually announcing the name here for the first time ever, so this is a sneak peek.
Wow.
My next book coming out next January is called 8-4 Habits, and it's really a book about breaking free from the ritualized routines that we have accepted as normal but no longer serve us. And so the idea of the triangle is pretty central there. It's the 3 priorities that we all have in life, that I have in my life, that I think everybody basically has when you break it down, which is health, relationships, and money. And so if you consider them as 3 arms of the triangle, it's pretty clear cut that they are all very important to a life well lived. And a triangle is the most stable structure in the world. The problem is, if you let one of the arms go or ignore one of the arms, the whole thing collapses. What I've also figured out, though, is that the idea of balance, I think, is bullshit. I very much fight against the idea of small marginal gains as a way to make transformative change. I've come to accept that ambition and transformation needs to be aggressive, almost unhinged, where we need to purposefully seek unbalance. And so at any given time, what I'm doing is I'm actively trying to get better at one of those arms of the triangle while maintaining the others. And so accepting the fact that I can really only get better transformatively at one thing at a time. And so my process then is actually just trying to, at any given time, thicken one arm of the triangle without letting the other arms fall off. It's very much a seasonal approach to life. Yeah.
And how do you know if you're neglecting versus maintaining versus improving? Yeah. What's the difference?
Well, improving is relatively easy, because you're like, I'm in a season on family right now.
Mm-hmm.
I am, because I just had a baby a week ago. So I'm in a season on family right now. So I know that all of my spare time, my energy, my creative energy, right, it's going to go towards family. It's going to go towards one-on-one time with each of my 2 other kids to make sure they're not neglected with the new baby. And then, of course, being there for my wife after she's just given birth and helping out with the baby and stuff. So that one's pretty clear cut. The other ones, though, I call it an off-season checklist for the arms of the triangle that I'm maintaining when I'm focused on one thing. I'll give you an example. Let's say that I'm focused. So the season that I just came out of was I was finishing this next book. I
Okay.
wanted to get the next book, the manuscript, finished in before the baby was born. Because we didn't quite know when the baby was going to be born, I needed to give myself a couple week
Right.
buffer time. So I was very aggressively pushing on that book. Early mornings, I was waking up to work on the book. Any spare time during the week, I was pushing forward on the book. After the kids go to bed, sometimes I'd hit my notes so that I'd be more prepared in the next morning. Like, that was the focus. But then I had a checklist for family to make sure that it didn't fall off. And so part of that checklist is breakfast and dinner with the family every single day, drop off my son at school, 15 minutes one-on-one time with each child every day. Maybe that's a game, maybe that's reading, maybe that's playing basketball, going for a walk, maybe that's doing some gardening, whatever it is. But I have this checklist, and it's not to say that I always hit it, but like legit, I have these things written out. I don't have them right on me, but I have these things written out. And I will look at them at the end of the week. I'm like, where did I hit this? Where did I screw up? For business, for work, on my checklist is to send 3 unsolicited thank you messages to colleagues or people that work with me every single week. Just appreciation type messages. And some weeks I don't do that. And I sit down on Friday and I look at that checklist and I say, shit, I didn't tell at least 3 people that I work with or that I work in parallel with that they're great this week. Because a personal life philosophy is catch people in the act of doing something good. It's very easy to jump at people when they do things bad, and not recognize when they're doing things well, especially as it becomes expected. One of the greatest compliments I think that you can give to somebody is actually not complimenting them, because when you compliment them, it's kind of by its very nature something that you did not expect. And then when you expect somebody, it's like when you're working out and you're starting to work out and people are like, oh my God, like you're doing great, like you're getting compliments. And then once it's become a habit and a part of you, all of a sudden people start noticing. You're like, but I'm working so hard. It's like, no, the greatest compliment is they no longer compliment you.
Yeah. I've never heard
That's
that
a
before.
problem if you're a boss of people, of course. So that's just a couple examples of things on this checklist
Yeah.
to make sure that it doesn't fall off. And then, shit like make sure my social media account is posted on, or show up for meetings, which for me is anybody who I work with will tell you needs
You
to be on a
sometimes don't
checklist.
show up?
I'm so compartmentalized, man, that if I'm in a big project, like particularly a book, nothing else matters. I don't even remember that anything else exists,
Yeah.
which is a problem when you run multiple businesses sometimes.
So what season did you enter directly after? Because I know you gave yourself a couple weeks beforehand, but I feel like you jumped right back into work mode as soon as the baby came.
No. I'm in very much a wandering exploration mode
Okay.
right now. I mean, I'm in a family season is what I'm
Okay.
in, but professionally, I mean, like, a little bit about my business. Like, I have a couple companies, but I don't operate any of them. And so I don't actively work in any of the companies that I own. And when I say that, like, I'm not needed, almost to the point where it hurts my ego. This is what I wanted, but then it's like, oh, why don't you have questions for me? I'm here if you need me, but they don't. They're wonderful. And so 90% of my time, upwards of 90% of my time is on books. And right now, I call it literary citizenship. I'm working very hard to build other relationships with authors. I'm working with one of the biggest book influencers. We're hosting dinners across North America. We're hosting remote calls. I've hosted a couple calls on like how do nonfiction authors navigate AI and leverage AI to better improve their writing. I've hosted a number of calls with
Yeah.
authors, stuff like that. Right? But I'm wandering. I'm exploring. I don't know what my next book is going to be, and I don't feel like I need to know. So I'm going to the library and I'm walking the stacks and I'm picking up anything that's interesting and I'm flipping through it. And if it catches my attention, then I'll keep reading. And if it doesn't, I'll put it back on the stack. I sent out an email to colleagues of just a what I'm up to email yesterday to 450 of my like closest colleagues over the years. So it took me like a week to organize that and write that email. And part of the email was like, hey, I want to be connected deeper than like social media. So here's what I'm up to. But this is not a selfish thing. There's good stuff, there's bad stuff, but I also want to hear about you. And what of course comes back is all these people I haven't spoken to for a couple of years are now giving me updates on their lives. And
Yeah.
spending time on that.
In a season where you're wandering a little bit more, how structured are you with these things? Because I imagine that sending an email like that, you're getting responses back. You still need time to spend reading through those, or at least some of them. Maybe you can't get to every single one. Like how much structure do you have for the maintenance, for the things that you're maintaining right now?
What do you mean by the things I'm maintaining? Like the
So
email response
you've
stuff?
got the three sides of the triangle, right? One is
Yeah.
being actively worked on in any given season. The other two are being more maintained. How much structure? I think you have the checklists, but like,
Yeah.
are you once a week sitting down and going through emails, or you still
No,
spend a
every
good chunk of your
day.
day?
I mean, the thing with the emails, which is nice, is it can be an in-between thing.
Right.
In between, I try to create a pattern of my day where in between, in those little times, especially as a parent, where you don't quite know whether you have 2 minutes or 20 minutes, you're waiting for somebody or something, or I don't quite know how much time I have. I try to engineer a way to either have a book or have something that's productive to do so I don't just flip on social media. And so I'll respond to those emails then, or in between calls, like after we do this, I have a call with my publisher about the cover for the next book. So
Right.
there will be 15 to 20 minutes in between the two calls. So I'll prepare for the next call, and then in the 5 or 10 minutes that so it's not that hard. It doesn't take a long time. I'm not stressed about getting back to them right away because I want to give them time and attention.
Right.
But then, the other arm of the triangle is health, right?
Mm-hmm.
Leading up to having this next kid, I was working out 5 times a week, sometimes
Mm.
6 times a week. I'm hitting like 3 now.
Okay. Okay.
And I think the most important thing with fitness is figuring out a way to make it convenient first, making
Mm-hmm.
it fit in with the natural flow of your life first before trying to make it perfect. So there's an F45 that's close to me and even closer to my son's school.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a class at 9:30 a.m. 9:30 a.m. is not my ideal time to work out, but I drop him at school and his drop off is 9:15, and I get right on my bike and I go straight to the F45 and I work out and I'm home by 10:20.
Mm. Nice.
So figuring out ways to fit it in like that, that's
Yeah.
convenient, that
Seizing
might not be
opportunities
ideal.
sounds like a lot of seizing opportunities.
Finding opportunities, yeah, yeah. Like I'm not going to go to the track. I'm not going to take time out on weekends because I want to be with a family during that time. But when you have time, you put a lot of fitness in reserve.
Mm-hmm. Mm. What's your quote? You say, build it while you can so that you have it when you need it. I'm butchering it, but there's something similar that you say all the time.
Yeah, something like that. Do what others, you
Build
do
it
what
while you have
others
it.
you do what others don't while you have the time so that you can have what others don't when
Mm-hmm.
you don't.
Yeah, makes sense.
Something like that.
I'd like to understand a little bit more about your story, how you went from personal trainer to having two companies that basically operate without you, not basically, operate without you, to becoming an author. Was this all part of your plan when you were a personal trainer, or how do you evolve
No,
into that?
it was always very disagreeable. I think that that's the first thing to know. There's this glorification of entrepreneurship. I don't think that most people should be entrepreneurs. I think you should maybe test it out and identify whether it's right or not for you. And if it is right for you, go after it. If not, be great. Find an amazing opportunity working for somebody and be smart with your money. I was always very disagreeable. I always question how things are done. I always thought that things could be done better or smarter. And so I think that that's a pretty distinct trait of entrepreneurs when I
Mm-hmm.
look back at it. But no, it was not a master plan at all. I mean, I was a personal trainer at a university. I studied kinesiology and did well as a trainer, but never thought that I would do anything else. I
Mm.
thought that I would perhaps begin investing in real estate while training, which is not a stupid thing to do.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
You're in a business that kicks off a lot of cash at a high profitability, like buy real estate ongoing,
Yep.
like not a stupid thing to do. So I studied residential real estate investing and all that for years, and I didn't end up doing it. And one thing led to the next, to the next, to the next. I think I gave myself a lot of space to explore. And
Mm-hmm. Continue.
what that led to was self-publishing the first book. So, I mean, you had the obvious choice where I talk about optimistic ignorance. I think perhaps the biggest advantage that I had back then in 2009, 2010, when all this started, was that I knew so little about what I should have been doing or how things are supposed to have been done because the internet, the modern day social media was still in its infancy. I didn't compare myself to other people. I didn't think about, who am I to write a book at 24 years old and self-publish it? I didn't even know how that existed. I didn't know how covers were made. I didn't know how editing happened. I assumed that covers were a thing and that editing happened, but I didn't know how it worked. But I was so blind to the bigness of it all that it allowed me to be optimistically ignorant and figure out the next step at any step of time. And the next step is always figure outable.
I agree.
It's just when you try to envision all of the steps. So you figure out, you almost blind yourself to the big thing.
Yeah.
Figure out the next step and then course correct.
Yeah.
As time goes. And you got to give yourself space to do that, which is a lot of what you do. Space is driven largely by, I won't even say like I would say financial competency. It's like, if you know where you are financially, you often have more than you think that you do. I don't know. Tell me what you think about that. Most people have more money than they think. They just have no idea how much they have or what it means or what to do with it
Yeah.
or how to manage it. Is that true?
Most people don't have enough clarity over what they're already doing with their money, how much money they actually have.
Interesting.
Like,
okay.
There's a lot of money going into places that they made a decision based on intuition. And they're not really clear on what the return on investment of that money is.
Okay.
So understanding, like, you need to understand what is that dollar meant for before you spend it. And oftentimes when we start working with people, they're already spending a bunch of money and they don't even remember half of these software subscriptions. They have software subscriptions that do the same things. They could just remove one and just use the other. But what we help people do is really understand what the dollars are supposed to be for before they're spent. And that gives people clarity. So I think even outside of the financial things, like you're talking about the bigness of it all, and you were optimistically ignorant to the bigness of it all. I think a lot of people become intellectually lazy, where they see something that's super overwhelming and they don't put in the effort to break it down into smaller steps so that they can figure out that next action. And once you do figure out that next action, I think things become much less overwhelming, and then you can just focus on that one thing.
You ever read a book called Just Keep Buying?
No.
Nick Maggiulli, I think is how you pronounce his last name. I had dinner with him last month in New York. It's called Just Keep Buying, but he's his next book that's coming out, I think it's called The Wealth Ladder, The Money Ladder. I should know this because I just texted him like yesterday about it. Let's see what the title is. The Wealth Ladder, yeah. And one of the things that I like about it is that he's identified, I think it was 4, maybe 5 distinct steps of wealth that people are in. And then what he does is he breaks down the book into what actions you should take in each step and how much they change. And the pros and cons and the trade-offs of each step. Like he says, he's like, $10 million plus of equity, right, of assets. He's like, you basically don't get there without ownership. It's like, there are exceptions. Okay. You could have been an employee for Facebook for 3 years and got stock options, and then been an employee for NVIDIA and got stock options. Like, there are exceptions. The only reason that I thought about it is what you just said. What you should do based off of where you are now and where you want to go. How much do you break down those steps? I think that service that you're providing is so good.
Well, what I liken it to is fitness. Anybody that's in fitness or has transformed their body understands that there are a number of key things that you just need to be consistent with for a long time. And I see finance as that. It's the same thing. You just have to be doing the right things consistently for a long enough time. It's hard to get started with fitness. I feel like
tell me about that.
Well, certain things you need to accumulate some wealth, some funds, wealth, whatever. I need to define the terms, but you need to accumulate some money. Cash. And then you do need to take some risks. So you want to mitigate the risks, but you're right that without that exception, and that's the only exception that I've ever thought of, where you're a CEO for a very large company and you're getting paid in stock options. But outside of that, if you become a CEO for my company, you're probably not going to be paid enough. Not right now, but maybe eventually. But if you start a company and you disassociate your time from your income, now you can start to accumulate enough funds that you can use those funds to start investing. So I think that's the first step, really. And that's the
expenses,
barrier.
like you said.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a couple ways to make more money in a business. More customers, more transactions per customer, your average cost of transaction per customer. So how do you achieve that? You get better at following up and getting people to buy more often, or you figure out a way to sell more to an existing customer, or you raise your prices. What's another way to make more money, though, that most people don't talk about? It's like you spend less on needless shit.
Yeah, it's true.
I mean, when was the last time that you called your internet provider? Well, there's a cap to it.
Yeah.
But it could open up a fair amount. I mean, a lot of the people that we work with are similar, right? Like we work with coaches, not in their financial stuff on their business, but so many of them, it's like, oh, you say you want to make an extra $1,000 a month. It's like, you could probably not spend $500
Yeah, I agree.
of what you're spending right now.
And the profit first, obviously, no profit first is right.
Yeah,
Mike
yeah, yeah.
McCallum. When you implement it in your personal life, it really helps you spend less, right? You're setting aside funds for specific purposes, and you know that you have to make do with what you have. So I always encourage people to make sure that they're monitoring their spending as well. But sometimes it is easier to sell more. So
Right.
I could make an argument for it's easier to sell for $1,000 than to try to spend $500 less.
I think it is. Like I just read The Latte Factor because I'm reading a lot of parables right now. And
Okay.
The Latte Factor is basically like a profit first type thing. It's a parable by
Okay.
David Bach. The idea is like it's not about coffee. He uses the latte factor as like the coffee analogy, right? If you don't spend your $6 on a latte every day, 5 days a week, you figure out little ways you can have wins, and then you put that aside. And he actually mapped it out in a way that was very interesting. He said, okay, if you work an 8-hour workday, the first 2 hours of your work is going to the government. That's going for taxes. You're working for the government. Right? The next 4 hours of your work is going to your hard bills, your food, your mortgage, your rent, your whatever. The last 2 hours of your day, though, should be going to you for your future. But oftentimes it's going to things like lattes, and that's why you have no money. And so he actually drew it as like a clock, which I thought was really interesting. But yes, I agree with you. I read that and I buy into it, and you see the numbers and you're like, oh, these numbers really work. But then it's like, but the absolute amount of money you're talking about here is reasonably small.
Yeah.
And so if you have no other option, then perhaps this is your only thing. But I feel like everybody these days has another option to make a fair bit of money on the side, and that's way easier than trying to not enjoy your even an Americano, a coffee shop these days is like $5. So my oldest son is 8 years old. And so we're getting to the point, and he's really interested in business and money and like super savvy with it. And he's actually good at like making money. So we're opening basically like I forgot what the name is, but like a minor trust account for him in Questrade right now, and it's under his name with his money. And I had like an hour and a half long conversation with him the other night. He wanted the long explanation. I said, do you want short, medium, or long, how money works, right?
Wow.
And I had a gold chain on, and I talked to him about money and gold and Bitcoin and the differences of them and the history of money.
How
And I was
old
like,
is your son for everybody
8.
listening? Yeah.
8.
Okay.
So I was like, okay, imagine that you have like a bunch of coconuts and you need rice. It used to be you'd have to like carry your coconuts, and you'd have to find somebody who wanted coconuts that also had rice that didn't want rice. And you both had to meet up and find it and then trade your coconuts for the rice. Money is just a store of value, basically saying, you don't need to buy my coconuts in order for me to buy the rice, and I don't have to carry these heavy ass coconuts with me. So I'm having that conversation with him, right? But then I talked to him about Bitcoin and gold and the differences of them. And he asked really good questions. With gold, he's like, well, can't they just like mine more gold? I'm like, yes, but it's getting more expensive. And so the value of gold is going up. But yes, they can make more. With Bitcoin, they can't. What do you mean? Well, there's only 21 million, but there's probably a bunch of it that's gone already that will never come back. Well, can't somebody just hack the system? Well, yeah, kind of. But like they've been trying for like 30 years and nobody has. So, the odds. And so we're having this whole conversation with him, right? And we're really enjoying it. But the idea of investing with him and trying to make sense of it from a young age and trying to have those conversations is like, I never had that conversation with my parents. My parents were savvy. My dad was savvy, but we never had that conversation. It just seems like something that our parents didn't talk about, even if they were good at.
I have the same experience actually. I grew up. So my biological father and my mom, it's funny that I refer to him as my biological father, but I grew up with my stepdad. I refer to him as my father because he is my father for all intents and purposes. He raised me.
He raised you. Sure.
So he was doing very well and is still doing very well. He's done very well for himself, came from absolutely nothing, a very generous guy. So I grew up after the age of like 10 in a household where money wasn't really an issue. But later in life, I realized because money wasn't an issue, I didn't understand the value of money, which is very ironic because now I deal with money for a living. I started thinking about this recently because I'm about to have a child as well. And one of the concepts that I think I wasn't taught about early on was return on investment. So not limited with your dollars,
Mm-hmm.
you don't need to think about what's the best use that I can get out of those dollars. And it's not just about dollars, it's also about time. I think had I learned those lessons earlier in life, I would have been more strategic with what I chose to spend my time on. Even making decisions about what I want to do for a living. Like when I was younger, I didn't really think about anything. I got into accounting not because it was like a super big passion of mine at the time. I found a way to make it my passion, but at the time it was something that my parents thought made sense for my personality, and they were right. But it didn't really matter because without understanding the ROI of what I'm choosing, nothing really felt appealing to me. I didn't want to do anything.
Yeah.
So
Tell
how
me
do
more
you?
about that. That's interesting.
Well,
What does that mean?
at an early age, I think what I should have been given, and like, I'm not bashing on my parents. I love my parents. I moved to 10 minutes away from my parents. Like, they are amazing people. But when you look back, there's certain lessons that I learned now. I wish that I learned them earlier in life. So I'm
Yeah.
thinking about how could they have taught me about the value of money and how to make decisions based on return on investment earlier. So one of the things that I'm thinking about is, well, there could be an allowance rather than just giving your children as much money as they want for anything that they want. You teach them about budgeting. So you have a
Mm-hmm.
certain amount of money that you're allocated, and it's not tied necessarily to
Yeah.
work. This is, I think about this a lot, and I'm very curious to hear your opinion about this as well. So
Okay.
my parents didn't want to pay their children to do things that should be done just because we're a family. So
Right.
you should help out. We all help each other. If we're asking you to cut the grass, it's not something I should pay you for. But on the other side, it's like, how do you teach return on investment without using money? So I'm thinking about, what if I give my son or daughter, it's my daughter, and there are different dynamics here at play from, at least in my traditional mindset, but how do I give them the ability to earn something without
Sure.
making them feel like they're supposed to get paid for everything that they're asked to do? And
Right.
but I want them to have the ability to earn things because I want them to have the ability to choose different jobs. So, well, you can do this job and it'll pay this much, but if you do this other thing, it'll pay more, but you'll have to figure things out on your own. And doing that, I think, would teach them return on investment. I never experienced this. I'm making this shit up myself. So I'm very
Yeah.
curious to hear your thoughts on all of my wacky ideas.
Well, I think about this stuff a lot, and I don't have distinct answers yet. I think with every child, it's probably going to be different based off of how they respond to the situation. But I do think about a lot. I think there's going to be a lot more information, and you're already seeing it coming out right now, books and podcasts and whatnot, that are teaching financial literacy skills and wealth psychology skills to wealthy people. You know, it used to be all the Dave Ramseys of the world. Like, that was the only thing you get. Basically, how to be not poor. Well, everybody who already had money was like, well, what do I do with this money? That, how do I, I'm rich. How do I make sure my kids don't turn into assholes?
Right.
That's a really important question to ask. And so you're starting to get books like Die with Zero. You're starting to get podcasts like what Sam Parr runs. What's this one about money? Basically, he brings on like rich people to talk about what they're doing with their money. You're
Okay.
starting to get resources like that I think are really useful. Morgan Housel a little bit. We'll talk about experiences where he goes and meets with billionaires and about how they manage wealth with their kids. He's told some stories about it too, but I don't think that there's quite enough. I think about it a lot. We're not stupid rich, but like, I don't have to work anymore.
Right.
And so it's my kids see that.
Right.
My oldest particularly, he's incredibly observant. Like, he sees that daddy doesn't work like other daddies do. He sees that I'm around all of the time. He sees that I genuinely really like what I do and I'm passionate about it and proud of it and that. Like, he sees that. So I think the first and perhaps most important lesson is leadership isn't by telling, right? Leadership is by doing. You lead by example. In my next book, there is a chapter called Choose Your Heart. And it is an entire chapter about figuring out what work is worth doing in your life and doing that fucking work. I mow my own lawn. I could easily pay somebody to mow my own lawn, but I mow my own damn lawn. My son and I went to the nursery, went to Islington Nurseries, and we went and picked out flowers and vegetables together. And then we came home and we weeded the garden beds and we planted the flowers and vegetables. And every day I come and I look at it and I point it out. I'm like, look, Calvin, we planted that. Like, that's going to be food for us. Like, we picked out flowers that we thought Mummy would like because Mummy likes purple. And he picked all the flowers. I could easily get somebody to landscape my garden for me.
Right.
But there's a difference between training and winning an Olympic gold medal versus buying one on eBay.
Yeah.
It's a distinctly different experience.
You'll
I think
never-
that,
There's some part of you that will always know that you didn't earn it, right?
look, there's nothing more special than turning a house into a home to raise your family. The joy that I feel. I have a list of delegation where I think that somebody should delegate. I call it the work worth doing tests. Do you want to hear them?
Yeah.
There's four elements of work worth doing.
So these are things that shouldn't be delegated?
So these are questions that you ask yourself when deciding whether you should delegate a task or a job or whether you should do it yourself that go beyond the pure time value equation.
Mm-hmm.
The very basic is like, was my time worth more than it would cost to hire out to do this?
And I bet you can make a good case for that.
I should not mow my own lawn.
Right.
Like,
If that's
very few people should.
Yeah.
Very few people should. So I have 4 questions. And if you answer yes to any of these questions, you do it yourself. If you answer no to all of them, then you delegate it. So the 4 work worth doing tests are, will this help build meaningful relationships? Will this teach me something valuable? Will being able to say I did it bring genuine satisfaction? And will this create memories to pass down? If you can say yes to any of those 4 things, you do that damn job yourself.
How did you come up with those 4 things? Was it something that you read somewhere or you came up with those things yourself?
There are certain aspects of the very, a lot of the time when you read like deeper self-help or self-development work, this kind of stuff comes out. There's nuance to it. Mm-hmm. But what we see, of course, now mostly is social media snips off the beginning and the end of it, and you just see the quick hit thing, right? The buy back your time, the quick hit highlight. And like anybody who's spouting these things thinks deeper than that, but that's what they think. And so there are certain things that bother me when I hear self-help.
You know what I really like about these 4 questions? I think a lot of people, they want to buy back their time, but when you ask them for what, it's hard for them to answer that question. And what you just described, those 4 things, that's really the for what.
I want to buy back my time so that I can mow my lawn with my kids. Right. So that I can plant flowers and vegetables with my son.
And I think people forget
I want to buy back my time so I can do the work that's worth doing. And so you asked about, how to get kids to want to do a job. I don't think it's paying or not paying. I think it's showing them that you're doing this stuff and that you feel genuinely fulfilled doing it. Every year we have a big landscaping job or something. I every spring, summer, I try to figure out like one way to beautify our home or our property. And over the years, we've lived here for 6 years. Every year, it's just been one thing. So last year, we decided to fill in all of our gardens with stone, with like river run stone, right? Small and big. One day, a truck showed up with 3 tons of stone and dumped it on our driveway. And some people would say, oh my God, that's a lot of work. I look at that and I'm like, that's free exercise. And so instead of saying to Calvin, who's the only one, old enough to really help, instead of saying to Calvin, you have to help me move this stone, or even worse, I'm going to pay you to move this stone because I would otherwise pay a landscaping company to do it. Mm-hmm. I just started doing it. I took a shovel and a wheelbarrow and I put the stone in the wheelbarrow and I dumped it in. And there's a concept called cognitive snacks that I talk about in the book, but basically a great way to keep your attention span throughout the day and to keep your energy high throughout the day and avoid brain fog is to refresh yourself with a cognitive snack, with a rote task. I like physical ones, but there could be rote tasks that you choose that are like crossword, Sudoku, whatever. Mm-hmm. In between things like Zoom calls. Mm-hmm. Where you're not actually task switching. You're not switching between one thing to the next, 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 because that's what actually exhausts us. It's pulling up all of these different mental schemas is what's exhausting. And so in between meetings and things like that, I go for 15 minutes and move some stone. And Calvin saw this. And so after about 2 weeks, after about a week, Calvin and Jaden came out and they said they wanted to help. And again, it was a pain in the ass because they weren't really helping. What was happening was that I was shoveling the stone into the wheelbarrow and dumping it into the thing, and they were walking alongside me, so I'd have to like avoid them with the wheelbarrow because they were like walking in front of it because they would like toddling, right? And then they wanted to ride back in the wheelbarrow. So now they're jumping in the wheelbarrow to push them back. So it made my job harder. But then after about 2 weeks, I went outside and I put on my work gloves and stuff to, fill up the wheelbarrow. And all of a sudden I see Calvin in one edge of the garden bed, and there's a bit of a slant in that area, and he was making a wall. He was, and I said, "What are you doing?" He's like, "It's like building blocks. I'm making a wall." And I wouldn't have ever thought of that, but it's actually the perfect solution for that space. And so my job that day was to be his helper. My job that day was to find the big stones, bring them over to him, and he was building them and making a wall. Well, every single time I walk by in the front of our house, that area of the garden bed, and I see those stones stacked that way, you know how much joy that brings me? You know how special that is? I will remember that just about more than anything else. I don't know if you saw the news with Scott Adams, where he has cancer and he's probably going to die by the end of this year. Scott Adams, the creator of Dilbert, right? He has prostate cancer, I think it was. But he came out with this long thing, and one of the most meaningful things that he said, and it is, I did Dilbert for 35 years. It's obviously what most people know me about. When I think back on my life and the most special moments, Dilbert, I don't even think about Dilbert. You know what I think about? I think about taking my stepdaughter to soccer and watching her soccer game. That's what I think about. This is a guy who is, for all intents and purposes, on his deathbed.
Yeah. Powerful stuff. I could talk to you about your kids forever. You have so many.
I could talk about my kids forever, too.
Yeah, I can imagine. I have other questions, but I want to talk about the book a little bit too, because you wrote an amazing book. I want to hear about what inspired this one. Why did you choose not to self-publish this one? Because the other books were all self-published, right? This is the first one that you use the publisher.
You're talking about the obvious choice?
Yeah. How was that experience? So tell me about what inspired this book, and why did you choose to use a publisher instead of self-publishing, and how has it been as a result of using a publisher rather than self-publishing?
So I think the nature of good work that you do is that it makes you better and helps you better understand yourself as a result of doing the work. The story of the Obvious Choice book is very much that. It started out of frustration, as most creative works do. Most of the people that we serve in my mentorship are fitness nutrition coaches. They're working so hard and accomplishing so little in building their business. And you go to them, and we still have hundreds of conversations a day on my Instagram with people in those industries. And you look at their account, and they call themselves a personal trainer or online trainer or nutrition coach or whatever, habits coach. And they're posting content regularly, multiple times a week. And then you talk to them, and they're like, how much you making? They're like, like 3 clients, but like 2 of them don't pay, they're friends. And I'm like, you're making like $150 a month. Like, what the fuck is going on here? How is this so backwards? And we're all blinded to it, where we think that the solution to all of our hopes and dreams is to effectively work for social media companies for free. It's insane. And so I set out to write a book for coaches originally that I was going to self-publish about what to think about when thinking about social media. And I remember when I sat down to start to map it out and really write it, I was in Mexico at the time we were living there. This was a couple winters ago. And I remember coming home one day and saying to Allison, I'm like, I care about this way more than I thought that I did. Because when I sat down to write about it, all of these other thoughts and ideas started coming up. Like, it's not that social media is bad. It's not that creating content is bad. It's that there's 2 very distinct games. The Obvious Choice book is effectively a book about deciding which game you're playing, understanding that different games have different rules of engagement, time horizons, odds of success, and reward mechanisms. And if you play by the rules of one game, but you desire the outcome of the other game, you're going to be burnt out and exhausted and frustrated. And so if the game you're playing is to try to be a full-time influencer, that game has very distinct rules. Long time horizon, low odds of success. You're going to Hollywood. You're going to wait tables on nights and weekends. You're going to be shit on by everybody for lots of years. You're probably not going to make it, but if you do, there's going to be outsized rewards for you, right? That's the rules of the game. That hasn't changed.
Right.
That's the rules of the entertainment game. If the game is to perhaps leverage media to build a business, how you use that media fundamentally shifts. How you measure the success of your efforts. The metrics that you fundamentally shift. You don't measure based off of engagement, because engagement is a bad metric for business success, unless you're trying to be an influencer. And so I realized that this book was much bigger when I started to put that together. And I was like, well, maybe I'll traditionally publish this thing. And so I spoke to a couple agents, like, yeah, there's something there, but you got to develop it a little bit. And then I spoke at an event in Chicago. I knew that there was a really great literary agent in the audience. Somebody told me that she was there. And so I made sure to let it slip on stage that I was working on my next book. And I might traditionally publish this and whatever. And so, 5 minutes after I'm done speaking, of course, Jade, stops me in the hall and we hit it off. She's been my agent. She's been wonderful. And she helped really craft the book into what it was. It started as something that was going to be self-published. I realized just how widespread these ideas were and how important they were. We always knew that it was going to kind of start with coaches and grow outside of that. And it has, and it's starting to,
Yeah.
But yeah, that's.
Yeah. I love the book. And actually, reflecting back at mistakes I made, I wish I read it sooner. I recently...
Well, that's what's interesting about it, is the way that I tell people in the fitness industry in a way that they can understand is it's kind of like abs. You've got to get them to realize that it's actually not all that important for health. And even for getting girls or whatever. With this book, actually, the people who are the biggest champions for this book are people who have big audiences. Because like abs, they worked so hard to get it. They gave up so much to get that big audience. And they've realized just how little that audience does for them and what actually leads to success. And I knew this going into publishing the book. It's fighting ego so much that you kind of gotta do it first to really get it. Or like you, Daniel, just have a tremendous amount of experience where you're like, here's where I went wrong. People almost need to look at that and like see themselves in it and be like, oh my God, I wish I knew this. Versus I think the books that sell the best and blast off from the beginning are books where it's like, oh my God, this is the path. With mine, with the obvious choice, it's more, I get that makes a lot of sense, but I'm still going to spend all of my time trying to entertain the internet for reasons I can't describe. And then after they do that for you or two, they're like, oh, that book that I read, I should have probably followed that. But you kind of got to do it to realize it.
But you are building
be a
big audience. Right? Like you talk about it in the book, and it's something that you're doing, you're investing the time, and it's a long-term play. You're not going to get you should never expect that social media is going to bring you the quick results, right? If you have no following, there are other ways that you can create lead generation outside of social media. But social media, if you want to have it, it will help all of the other things, but it's a long-term play. I avoided social media. Like, I really didn't want to put my face in content. I'm actually doing it now because I see how powerful it can be. I like meeting with people, and having this podcast, the whole point of it is to open the door to meet with people that I want to meet with. And I got that actually from that idea from Evan Carmichael, but you mentioned this in the book too, which was really interesting.
Yeah. An exceptional way to achieve a lot of business goals that have nothing to do with getting a famous podcast.
Right, exactly.
Podcasts to become a famous podcaster is about the most difficult road that you could possibly go on right now.
Yeah.
Not to say it's impossible, but like, you're competing against people who are spending $75,000 to $150,000 an episode with a 15 to 20 person full production studio. Diary of a CEO spends $50,000 to $100,000 on ads just to A/B test thumbnails.
Wow.
For their podcast.
Yeah.
You don't stand a fucking chance. You don't stand a chance. Now, if you're doing a podcast, Jack Wagoner, I did his podcast. I love the kid. He actually just emailed me. He's graduating high school in 2 weeks. And he's doing a podcast because he realized in high school that this was an amazing way to meet his heroes, to meet people he admired and get mentored. Holy crap. I'm in that dude's corner. Like, that's how you do it. If you live and work, in the book I talk about the Best of Etobicoke podcast, right? If you live and work in a neighborhood, one of the best ways that you can become the obvious choice for literally any business you own in that neighborhood is to run a podcast where you celebrate the most impactful people in your neighborhood, because that is a hack to get to know and ingratiate yourself and offer value. You own a business in any neighborhood, in any community. What's your goal? To become a trusted confidant and source and friend to the most wealthy and well-connected people in that neighborhood. How do you do that? Well, start a podcast and interview them for it. It's not rocket science.
Right.
Right? That's how you do it.
Yeah.
That's a great reason to start a podcast. Nobody cares about your shitty, goblet squat tutorial that you put on Instagram if you are a personal trainer in a neighborhood with 50,000 people. Nobody cares.
There's a line in your book. I wrote it down. Trust is more important than expertise. You talk about that in your book. Do you recall?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So I think it's kind of the point that you're making right now. I want to push a little bit more on that. What exercise did you just mention? Squats?
Sure. I mean, you could pick anyone. You could talk about the 24-year-old white male personal trainer who specializes in training new mums to help them get their body back, and then their Instagram is them strongman lifting a log above their head. You could talk about all these examples.
And it seems like the right thing to do, right? You want to showcase your expertise in something. Even me in accounting, right? It feels like the right thing to do. Go on Instagram and just start talking about accounting. Nobody wants to listen to it. So
and also, nobody looking for an accountant is going to go on Instagram and say, I'm going to choose my accountant. I'm going to look at a bunch of Instagram and TikTok content from accountants as a way to choose which accountant I hire. If you are an accountant that is trying to build your brand as an accountant in an industry of accountants, yes. If you own a business and you're looking for deal flow, if you own a business and you're looking to perhaps attract talent, that's a fantastic way to do it. But it's not a good way to generate business.
Mm-hmm.
Different games. Games.
So why do you say that trust is more important than expertise?
Trust transcends expertise. Why do I believe that to be true? Well, I mean, look at your own experience. Think about all of the things and services that you've bought in the last week, in the last month, right? Whether you hired maybe a coach, an accountant, the microphone in there, the chair you're sitting on, everything. Like, all that I need to say is, do you even know if any of these companies even have a social media account? Like, think about everything that you've purchased in the last month. Do you even know if any of them have a social media account, let alone whether or not their social media account has influenced your purchase behavior in any way, shape, or form?
Right.
In an outlier case, it's possible that one of them have, and in that case, it's if they are in a similar industry than you that you maximize in. So if we're a fitness coach, we might hire our fitness coach based off of their social media. The majority of clients don't, but you do because you maximize in fitness because you work in fitness. That's the only case where it happens. And so trust transcends expertise in that most everything that we purchase and most everything that every human being purchases everywhere, they are completely ignorant towards what makes that thing good or bad. You just have no idea. The world is too complicated. Every single time we walk outside anywhere or use our phones or computers or anything, we should all be looking up and yelling, how the hell does this happen? This is amazing, because it's magic. Mm-hmm. It's literally magic, and we take it for granted. Well, it's the same with anything we purchase. We don't know how that thing works. Somebody buying your services if you work in fitness has no idea what makes a good or bad fitness professional. You know what makes a good or bad fitness professional, but they don't. And so what you're actually looking for in terms of getting hired is becoming the trusted source. That's the obvious choice. The obvious choice is trusted. Well, I give, a trust triangle in the book. There's 3 elements of trust. There's specificity. I can ask you a question or two if I have the opportunity, learn about you, and then cater my background or my experience specifically to that one thing that you do or that you feel like you need right now. I had an experience when I was a trainer in the gym, and I remember I had a client who came up to me and asked me if I might be interested in training them. They were perhaps interested. And I said, well, tell me about yourself. And they said a number of things, but one of the things that they mentioned was that they like to play tennis, but their shoulder's giving them a lot of pain. Okay. Well, now I'm not talking to them about fat loss. I could see that they were heavy, right? Mm-hmm. But they weren't interested in fat loss. So me talking to them about fat loss would have been irrelevant. Instead, what I did is I went to my cabinet where I had a series of studies that I always kept. And I went through and I found the shoulder one. And I specifically found a study on shoulder rehab. They were a medical professional, so they responded well to research. And so I knew that, right? And I picked that out and I stapled my card to it and I said, my degree's in kinesiology. I've studied athletic injuries, significant amount. Here's some information for you on shoulder rehab and performance specific to tennis players. I've already read it. I know it, but I'd love for you to read it and then give me a call and we could chat about it. Of course, they became a client, right? So specificity is number one. Number two is familiarity. How often do they see you? There's a concept in behavioral psychology called cognitive ease, which is that we trust something and deem something as more important if we see it more often or if it's easier to comprehend. That's why in books and in marketing copy, you see some text that's bigger letters or in bold, right? That makes it easier to comprehend. We trust it more. We think that it's more important. Well, you can manufacture familiarity on a small scale. On a big scale, what brands do is they spend millions upon millions upon millions of dollars a year on these huge marketing campaigns so that you see them everywhere. Well, in a neighborhood, you can manufacture that. The most basic example is if you're going to do a flyer mailing, let's say, or a letter drop or whatever to a group of people. Well, let's say that you have the amount of money where you can afford to send 5,000 letters. You would be far better sending one letter every week to 500 people for 10 weeks. You would be much better off doing that than sending one letter to 50,000 people one time. You see what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
You can manufacture familiarity on a small scale. I give the example of Bolton Foods and, parking a meat truck on a street. If you see a presence in your neighborhood, it's familiar to you. You assume also that your neighbor is buying from that company. And we trust our neighbors, even if we don't know them, even if we don't know whether they're buying from that company. But we trust them. So I give a lot of examples in the book for different industries of how to do that. And then the third one is community. We trust people who are in similar communities to us. We trust our neighbors. We trust our church buddies. We trust our pickleball bros. If somebody who you go to church with makes a recommendation for a service, you will trust that service more than an actual expert in that industry. Even if your church-going buddy doesn't know anything about that industry and the other person is an actual academic expert.
100%.
It's idiotically stupid, but it's true.
Yeah, 100%.
So you work backwards from that with your business. That's what the book is about, to build systems to integrate yourself into those communities.
Yeah, love it. My last question is, where can people find you online to see more of your work?
Newsletter is the best. I'm at 5repsfriday.com. I send a newsletter to like 75,000 people each Friday. Folks seem to like it. It's got one tip on money. It's got a couple tips on money, a couple tips on health, couple tips on relationships. So it's that triangle, right? Each week. There's obviously 5 of them, 5 reps. And then I'm on YouTube now. I'm putting a bigger push on YouTube. So I think it's Jonathan Goodman Coach on YouTube. I don't know. Just search my name. I'm a late adopter to everything, so I have terrible screen names.
Well, you're a late adopter, but you do it well.
Thank you.
Jonathan, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your time.
Appreciate you, man.